Welcome to Trending Unpacked, where we make sense of what the world is searching for. On the evening of Sunday, the 14th of December 2025, Australia really experienced a moment of profound shock, one that instantly echoed across the globe.
It did.
Bondi Beach, it's an image that's just so deeply ingrained, isn't it? A symbol of safety, of the Australian summer.
It absolutely is. It's, cultural shorthand for an idyllic, secure lifestyle.
So when news broke of a mass shooting at Archer Park, right next to the iconic pavilion, the world did what it always does in those moments of sudden, violent uncertainty.
It surged. And that reaction wasn't just local, it was instantaneous and global.
Why so fast on a global scale?
Well, when a setting like that is violated, the emotional and cognitive dissonance is just extreme. It triggers these massive, immediate search spikes because people are trying to confirm something that feels unimaginable.
That a place they associate with absolute safety has become the scene of a tragedy.
Exactly. They're searching frantically to try and stabilize the facts before chaos and rumor can really take hold.
And the facts that authorities confirmed, well, they were devastating. They shifted the incident very quickly from a shocking act of violence to a calculated act of terror.
They did. This was a mass shooting targeting a very specific community event.
The annual Chinooka by the Sea celebration.
Yes. It was being held in Archer Park. Nearly 1,000 people were there, celebrating the first night of Hanukkah. The sheer audacity of targeting a peaceful gathering celebrating light and faith is, well, it's hard to comprehend.
It forces you to confront a very uncomfortable reality.
It does. And the specific timing, the target, combined with what was found at the scene later, it led authorities to make a very clear declaration.
This was officially designated a terrorist incident almost immediately.
It was. So our mission here, as we unpack the verified police statements and the investigative reports, is to really provide clarity. We want to focus only on the critical facts and the context that explain how this happened.
And what it reveals about, I suppose, the shifting threat environment we're in.
Precisely. And the raw statistic that really anchors this tragedy is its historical weight.
This is now the deadliest terror incident in Australia's history, and the deadliest mass shooting since the 1996 Port Arthur massacre.
And that context, Port Arthur, is so critical. That event fundamentally redefined Australia's relationship with firearms.
The weight of that single statistic tells you exactly why the policy reaction that followed this was so swift and so nationally unified.
It was a tragic marker in time. We need to understand the specifics of what happened, but we also need to analyze the information architecture that kind of collapsed around it, the intelligence failures, the policy gaps, to really understand the scale of this moment.
Okay, let's establish the clearest possible chronology from the sources. We need to unpack the timeline of events that evening at Archer Park.
Absolutely. For anyone following the news in those first few hours, it was incredibly confusing. So anchoring it to a factual timeline is the only way to start.
So where does the chain of events begin?
It begins just as that family celebration was at its height. Late afternoon turning into early evening. The first calls to emergency services came in at approximately 18.47 AEDT.
Okay, so just before 6:50 p.m., what do the sources confirm about how the attack itself actually began, the first visual evidence?
Well, video evidence and numerous eyewitness accounts, they painted a pretty clear picture quite quickly.
Okay.
Two men dressed in black clothing, and they initiated the shooting from a highly strategic position.
Which was where?
A pedestrian footbridge. It's one that strides the busy car park located just north of the Bondi Pavilion.
Wow. So they had a high vantage point.
A horrifyingly effective one. It gave them a calculated vantage point, firing down directly onto the crowds gathered in Archer Park. It just maximized the exposed area.
That structural advantage, it really suggests a calculated design, doesn't it? Rather than just a spontaneous act.
Oh, completely. And what we know about the intensity of the attack confirms that.
What do we know?
The sources are chillingly precise here. Forensic analysis later determined that the two of them fired a total of 103 bullets.
103. And the weapons.
Investigative reports confirm they used at least one bolt-action rifle. And that detail is significant.
Why is that?
In a situation like this, you might expect a rapid-fire weapon. But a bolt-action rifle requires manual reloading for each shot. It suggests a very deliberate, aimed effort.
So not just spraying bullets, but a cold, focused intent on lethal targeting.
That's what it implies. That level of intensity, the choice of weapon, it all speaks to premeditation.
Despite that brutality, the police response was remarkably fast. That's a key point in the material.
It was crucial. The New South Wales Police Force put out a statement confirming an active incident within just 10 minutes of the first call at 18.57.
And that's important, isn't it? Getting official word out that quickly.
It's a vital public safety measure. It helps manage that initial information vacuum where, wild speculation just takes root online.
But even with a quick response, The aftermath just illustrates the severity of those few minutes of fire. The confirmed toll is devastating.
The human cost is immense. Confirmed statistics show 16 people were killed.
And that count includes one of the gunmen.
Yes, who died at the scene. And the scope of the injuries is also staggering. 43 people injured, needing immediate hospitalization.
And that number includes the second gunman and some police officers as well.
That's right. The second gunman was apprehended in critical condition, and at least 2 police officers were injured responding to the threat. But the really tragic detail is the age range of the deceased.
From a 10-year-old girl to an 87-year-old man.
It just underscores the indiscriminate cruelty of it all. An attack aimed at a family event.
Okay, let's pivot from the visible violence to the secondary threat, the thing that really shifted how this incident was classified.
Right.
The NSW police commissioner officially designated this a terrorist incident, and that requires more than just mass casualties. What was the specific evidence?
The commissioner cited 2 primary factors. Beyond the obvious timing and the targeting of a Jewish community event, the most critical factor was the discovery of a secondary ongoing threat.
IEDs.
Exactly. Homemade improvised explosive devices were found inside a car that was linked to the deceased shooter.
And where was the car?
Parked strategically on Campbell Parade, which is the main road that runs right along the beach.
So this wasn't just an active shooter scenario that ended when the firing stopped. This was layered.
It fundamentally changes the tactical calculus for the first responders. The presence of IEDs meant the police weren't just securing a crime scene, they were dealing with a potential secondary blast.
Which could have been designed to target them or people fleeing.
Potentially. It's
Yeah.
designed to maximize fear and casualties. The New South Wales bomb squad had to intervene immediately, turning the site into a high-stakes counter-terrorism operation. It confirms the calculated nature of the attack.
How does the complexity of this scene, this layered threat, compare to Australia's previous high-profile terror incidents?
It's a significant evolution. Something like the 2014 Lindt Cafe siege. That was a high-profile hostage situation, but it was primarily a static threat.
Right, contained to one location.
Here you have an active shooter incident combined with strategically placed unexploded bombs. This layered attack method aligns more closely with international terror tactics. It shows a sophistication aimed at overwhelming emergency resources.
And as we said, this is now the deadliest terror incident in Australian history. This has to mandate a reassessment of domestic security.
Absolutely. And you have to remember, the ASIO had already lifted the national terror threat level to probable back in August 2024.
So this incident tragically validates that assessment.
It does. It highlights that the threat is now highly mobilized, it's domestically sourced, and it's capable of executing these complex attacks on soft targets.
Building on that timeline, let's now pivot to the human response on the ground. Because when systems fail and chaos erupts, it's often the actions of ordinary people that define the moment.
Indeed, it's so crucial to shift the narrative from the cold forensic data to the acts of profound bravery that emerge during those minutes of terror.
And the account that drew immediate widespread attention involves the unarmed intervention of a bystander, Ahmed al-Ahmed.
His story is one of extraordinary moral courage. He's an asylum seeker, and he approached the shooter spontaneously, not in some planned way.
Right.
He came from between 2 parked cars. The sources detail that he tackled one of the shooters from behind, physically seized the weapon, and managed to turn it on the gunman.
That is just unbelievable. This singular, unarmed intervention disrupted the attacker.
It did. It forced that specific assailant to retreat back toward the footbridge where his father was. The New South Wales Premier called him a real-life hero.
And he was seriously injured in the process.
He was. Required surgery. But what's so fascinating psychologically is that immediate instinct to protect others, overriding the deep-seated survival instinct to flee. He didn't calculate the risk. He just acted.
And his intervention was tactically impactful. It bought crucial seconds for other people to find shelter.
It did. And the fact that the government was so quick to highlight his status as an asylum seeker also offered a really powerful counter-narrative to the hate that motivated the attack.
And he wasn't the only one. There was a second, equally selfless act of bravery that speaks to the visual confusion of the scene.
Yes, another asylum seeker who also displayed immense bravery by actively moving toward the danger. He reportedly went onto the bridge and kicked a weapon away from one of the gunmen.
But that led to some confusion.
A momentary tragic confusion. In the chaos, with weapons being handled, he was briefly mistaken for an attacker by some bystanders. And it just perfectly illustrates the impossible decision-making environment for civilians and police in that situation.
Beyond direct confrontation, there were countless acts of community protection, sheltering the vulnerable. Jessica Rosen's story is incredibly moving.
Her actions really encapsulate that selfless focus on survival. She was initially looking for her own 3-year-old son.
Who is safe with his grandmother.
Correct. But amidst the gunfire, she saw another little girl screaming, a child she didn't know. And she immediately threw herself down and lay on top of that girl until the firing stopped.
She sustained injuries herself doing that.
Minor cuts, yes. She performed the ultimate act of maternal protection for a complete stranger. Her quote, that they were just eating donuts with our kids and celebrating light, it just drives home that brutal contrast.
And we also know that community resilience involved rapid, organized efforts.
That's right. The sources highlight that a large, spontaneous group of men started gathering children from the playground area, which was the closest point of immediate danger, and moved them to the surf club for shelter.
These actions, the spontaneous formation of human shields, of evacuation groups, they're what minimize casualties before police can arrive.
They are the immediate lines of defense.
We must pause to honor the victims. The diversity of the deceased reinforces that this was an attack on the community writ large, but specifically targeting Jewish Australians.
The pain inflicted on the Jewish community is immense. 2 respected Chabad rabbis, Eli Schlanger and Yaakov Levitan, were among those killed. This directly underscores the targeted religious nature of the event.
An attack on community leadership.
And faith itself.
And then there is the deeply tragic story of Alex Kleitman, the Holocaust survivor.
Alex Kleitman was 87 years old. The sources confirm he was killed while actively using his body to shield his wife from the bullets.
The profound historical irony is just crushing.
It is. A man who survived the ultimate historical persecution of the Jewish people dies saving his wife from a modern act of anti-Semitic terror on Australian soil.
The list of victims also included the youngest fatality, 10-year-old Matilda, and international visitors as well.
Yes, a French national, Dan Elkiam, and a Slovak citizen, Marika Pogani. It emphasizes that the reverberations of this attack were truly global.
And we have to connect this back to the broader context. This happened amidst heightened anti-Semitic sentiment, both globally and domestically.
Yes, since late 2023, this community was already operating under elevated tension. So to have this targeted violence erupt during Hanukkah, a celebration of resilience and light, makes the pain all the deeper. It was an attack on identity.
And finally, on heroism, we have to recognize the first responders. The sources specifically noted some of the paramedics were from the Jewish community themselves.
Which requires an almost superhuman degree of professionalism. To put your own personal distress aside and perform critical medical care in that environment, where the targets are people from your own community, it demonstrates the highest level of commitment.
We must now shift our focus to the perpetrators, to the critical details of the investigation, who these attackers were, their ideology, and the intelligence context.
Right. The investigation confirmed very quickly that this was a father and son operation. The father, who was 50, was killed at the scene. The son, 24, was taken into custody, critically injured.
And what are the specific demographic details we have?
The son was Australian-born. The father had been a resident for decades, arriving back in 1998 on a student visa and later acquiring a resident return visa. And these details are important as they factor directly into the policy debate around firearm ownership for non-citizens.
A debate we'll get to. But the motive was declared definitively as anti-Semitic terrorism. What was the specific evidence for that?
The evidence was concrete and unambiguous. First, police confirmed that both gunmen had pledged allegiance to the Islamic State, or IS.
Okay.
And second, 2 IS flags were found displayed in their vehicle, the one parked on Campbell Parade with the IEDs inside.
So it provided a clear ideological mandate for the violence.
It did. It was an act of extremist religious violence, specifically defined by police as anti-Semitic terrorism, directly targeting the Jewish community.
Which raises this massive question regarding preventative intelligence. The 24-year-old son was known to ASIO before the attack.
He was, and this is where it gets really difficult. The son had been on ASIO's radar since 2019.
And why was that?
It was due to alleged close ties to a network of individuals who were later jailed for IS-related offenses. So there's a clear historical connection to radicalized thought.
If he's known with those kinds of connections, why wasn't this mitigated? What was ASIO's threat calculation?
This is a point of huge post-incident scrutiny. The assessment seems to have been that he was not an immediate threat.
Which in hindsight is just chilling. What does that term even mean in practice?
It generally means the individuals flagged, they are a person of interest, but they may not be under active 24/7 surveillance. They aren't believed to be actively planning an attack that day.
So they likely judged him to be radicalized, but maybe not operationally capable.
That's the likely scenario. Or they prioritized him lower due to resource limits. The failure, clearly, was in assessing the operational potential of this radicalized individual acting in concert with a legally armed parent.
So the failure was underestimating the family unit as an operational cell.
Precisely. They may have viewed the son's ties as historical or non-threatening because he hadn't crossed a certain threshold on his own. The key vulnerability was the radicalization in the context of the family unit.
Which provided the ideology and, crucially, the means to execute the attack.
Yes, facilitated by the father's legal status.
Which brings us to perhaps the most confounding detail. The father possessed at least 6 licensed firearms. How was a person linked to a known terror associate legally armed with multiple weapons in Australia?
This highlights a devastating systemic failure. Australia's gun laws, post-Port Arthur, are famously strict. But the father was a member of a certified gun club.
And that provides a pathway.
Under the system, membership in a license club allows you to apply for certain categories of license, provided you pass background checks and have a genuine reason.
So the loophole wasn't necessarily the type of weapon, but the vetting mechanism itself.
Exactly. The fact that he passed background checks despite his son's established known ties to jailed IS operatives, it indicates a massive oversight.
A failure to cross-reference state-level gun licensing records with federal security intelligence data from ASI.
Correct. The system was designed to screen for criminal history and mental illness, but it clearly failed to robustly incorporate connections to domestic terror networks.
And if the father was using a bolt-action rifle, that type of weapon is under less restrictive licensing categories than, say, a semi-automatic.
Right. So a legal pathway was exploited for a weapon type that might have been considered lower risk, yet it proved devastatingly effective in a mass casualty scenario.
And finally, there's that strange detail about their cover story.
Yes. The sources noted that the father and son had told family they were going on a fishing trip to Jervis Bay before the attack.
A small detail, but it speaks volumes about premeditation.
It does. They established a plausible cover for their absence, ensuring your family wouldn't raise an immediate alarm, which maximized their element of surprise.
So, to summarize, we have a meticulously planned, ideologically driven attack by a father and son. One was known to intelligence, but deprioritized. The other provided the legal means via a massive failure in gun licensing oversight.
And that convergence of radical ideology, domestic recruitment, and legal access to firearms makes it a profoundly difficult challenge for security services moving forward.
This tragic event quickly became a global news item, but the way we all consumed that news, the information aftershock, is just as critical to analyze. Let's turn to how these incidents spread online.
The immediate search patterns were just disproportionate, and that's because of Bondi's iconography. The data shows search is spiking, driven by 3 things: the location's global recognition, the overwhelming uncertainty, and the speed of visual content circulating.
So international audiences who might not normally follow Australian news were immediately searching.
Right, they were searching for confirmation that the Bondi Beach, the one they know from movies and travel shows, was under attack.
That global recognition amplifies the shock value. An attack in an unfamiliar suburb is a local tragedy, but at Bondi, it registers as a global security failure.
And that shock value, combined with the lack of stable official facts in the first hour or two, creates the perfect crucible for misinformation to flourish. When facts are scarce, people rush to fill the information gap.
What were some of the specific patterns of misinformation that we saw?
Well, you saw immediate competing narratives trying to assign blame before any official statement. There was speculation about the number of shooters. Was it 1? Was it 3?
Fueled by those 2 separate acts of bystander heroism, which complicated the visuals.
Exactly. There were also conflicting reports on the weapons, often sensationalizing them as military grade before the bolt-action rifle detail was confirmed.
Yeah.
And most dangerously, the circulation of graphic, unverified videos that just amplified public fear.
And that fear is so deeply amplified by the setting itself, a place perceived as universally safe.
Location-based fear amplification is central here. For many Australians, Bondi is an untouchable safe space. When that perception is shattered, it induces widespread anxiety. If it can happen there, it raises questions about security everywhere.
The psychology behind these fear-driven searches is critical. It's not necessarily malicious. It's a human response where we seek information, even incomplete information, because data provides the illusion of control.
We cling to the nearest data point when the world is shaking. And that reality places an enormous ethical burden on media outlets and officials. We saw the NSW police trying to provide clear framing, focusing only on confirmed updates to counter that flood of misinformation.
So what's the advice for someone consuming news during an unfolding crisis like this?
I think slowing down information consumption is probably the most vital countermeasure we have. The initial wave of data is always the most polluted and emotionally charged. We have to consciously choose to rely on confirmed official sources and just be patient.
It shifts the role from being a passive recipient of chaos to an active, responsible consumer of verified reporting.
It does. And responsible reporting also means resisting the premature politicization of the crisis. We saw policy debates about gun control and intelligence failures starting within hours, often before the specific facts were even established.
This tragic day at Bondi quickly became a national moment of reckoning. We have to look at the wider implications for Australia and its long-held public safety reputation.
The primary impact is on that foundational reputation, which has been built on the bedrock of the 1996 National Firearms Agreement after Port Arthur. For nearly 3 decades, Australia has been held up globally as the gold standard for effective gun control.
And this attack, specifically the detail that the father possessed licensed firearms, it strikes right at the heart of that reputation.
It represents a catastrophic failure of the regulatory system. The question moves beyond preventing illegal arms and focuses squarely on closing the loopholes within the legal licensing regime itself.
Which led to an immediate, powerful policy shift. The National Cabinet convened almost straight away.
Yes, the speed of the political response was extraordinary. The National Cabinet unanimously agreed to strengthen gun laws, focusing on 3 major areas of reform.
Okay, let's detail the first one, restricting ownership.
The first and most significant proposal was to restrict firearm ownership to Australian citizens only. This directly closes the door on permanent residents or those holding visas, like the one the father held. It's a direct response to the details of the perpetrators.
And the second area addressed the fragmentation of data.
That's right, accelerating the launch of a comprehensive, unified national firearms register. A unified registry is seen as critical to improving intelligence sharing and ensuring ASI data can be immediately cross-referenced nationally.
And finally, they addressed the fact that the father held multiple weapons.
Yes, the third proposal was limiting the number of firearms a single person can own, regardless of their legitimate sporting needs. The goal is to reduce the sheer supply of lethal force available to any one person.
Beyond domestic policy, this incident tragically connects Australia to a broader tapestry of global tension.
It does. The timing and the target selection tragically validated that elevated terror threat assessment. ASIO had raised the level to probable in August 2024, citing increased community tensions and politically motivated violence related to the Gaza war. This attack was the most destructive manifestation of that risk.
This context also shaped the diverse responses, both domestic and international. Let's contrast the domestic unity with the complexity of the international reaction.
Domestically, the response was one of remarkable unity. The Prime Minister called it an act of pure evil. We saw immediate solidarity from diverse groups, including the National Imams Council and Jewish organizations. They were unanimous in rejecting the violence.
But the international reaction brought a layer of geopolitical complexity, particularly from Israel.
Indeed. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the shooting, but he simultaneously used the platform to publicly criticize the Australian government, accusing them of pouring fuel on this anti-Semitic fire.
Which was directly linked to Australia's broader geopolitical stance on the recognition of Palestine.
Yes. It just illustrates how quickly a domestic tragedy can be leveraged into a complicated international political debate.
Yet, even in that complex atmosphere, Netanyahu took a moment to praise the heroism of the bystander, Ahmed al-Ahmed.
That moment offered a powerful counterpoint. Netanyahu specifically praised the bystander as a brave Muslim, noting he saluted him for stopping one of the terrorists. It momentarily shifted the focus back to shared human values, even in the midst of extreme political friction.
Ultimately, the Bondi attack forced Australia to confront a reality that even the most stringent laws can't completely insulate a country from targeted, ideologically driven terror.
And that the definition of security threats continues to evolve.
Right.
When a father and son using legally acquired weapons can execute such a devastating attack, it signifies that the focus must expand beyond just border security. It demands meticulous attention to domestic radicalization and a deep commitment to community cohesion. The policy shift has begun, but the long work of healing has just started.
It's clear that the aftermath of the Bondi Beach shooting will define Australia's public safety and community resilience efforts for years to come. In the face of such calculated darkness, the stories of people running toward danger, shielding strangers, and coming together to mourn demonstrate that while hate can strike hard, it can't extinguish the core values of an open society. It's in those moments of collective support that we find the capacity to move forward. In our next episode, we step away from breaking news and into beauty trends as searches rise around butterskin, the skincare aesthetic quietly taking over social feeds.